Well, Houston, we've been through a lot together. We started in radio 60 years ago. It was such a great gig, my father cautioned me against going into this thing called television, but we did it, and we had a pretty good run. We even went from black and white to color TV, then to high definition. I keep hearing about streaming and digital, and, well, it's a chance to reconnect with my friends and viewers and share stories from our times together throughout these last 6 decades. What do you say, Houston? Let's do this. Good evening, friends. I'm Dave Ward.
And I'm Shara Fryer, and I'm on Dave Ward's podcast.
And we're having a blast.
It's so much fun. It's like old times.
It really is.
I want to cry. I have not heard you in person say, "Hello, friends." And so long, I just gets me all emotional. Heard it every day for 27 years.
And that is our report for tonight. Stay tuned for Nightline, and be sure to join Bob Boudreau and Cynthia Cisneros for the weekend editions of Eyewitness News.
For Shara Fryer, Tim Melton, Gene Norman, Marvin Zindler, happy birthday, Marvin, from Shara and I, and Alvin Van Black. I'm Dave Ward. We thank you for being with us. Have a great weekend and good night.
Marvin Zindler was truly a unique person, as you know.
He was.
He destroyed every cliche in the world.
Several restaurants near downtown Houston and a fortune cookie company are on the health department's list of places that voluntarily close to clean up. And Action 13's Marvin Zindler is here to tell all. Marvin?
Well, Dave, roaches, rodents, and filthy equipment were among the reasons why health inspectors asked these places to voluntarily close to shape up.
Marvin was truly unique. I do remember on his deathbed, he had a lifetime contract with Channel 13.
Yes, he did. I remember when he signed it.
He worked until the day he died.
I was there the day before he died.
I
That
was,
Saturday,
yeah.
we were both there. And Melanie was there. There were quite a few of us who were there, and he still had his blue glasses on at one point.
Yep, I know.
I remember him taking his glasses and lowering them, and he looked me straight in the eye, and he said, "Now, don't you forget. I want you to remember. You know this, and I want you to make sure the world knows it. The Chicken Ranch. It was John Hill who wanted that place shut down because he was going to run for governor. He was
State
Attorney General. John Hill. It was John Hill, and I said, "Yes, sir. Yes, Marvin, you're the boss." And he had a pacemaker. Is that what they call it? A defibrillator in his chest, implanted. And as his organs were shutting down, he had pancreatic cancer.
Yes.
And as his organs were shutting down, it would kick his heart back into motion. And the doctor came in that Saturday when we were there, and basically to say, "Marvin," and I just remember the last time I saw Marvin, it was like he just said, they want to turn off, and he didn't know what to call it. He couldn't say defibrillator. He called it something else. They want to turn off my dryer or whatever. I mean, he had such a crazy name for it. And he said, "It kicks like a mule every time. It shocks my heart again." And he said, so I told him, "Okay, we'll just turn it off." And that was the way he was telling me goodbye. And I said, "Marvin, you're the man,
Yep.
You make the choice, and I'm right here with you." And he died the next day, so that's what happened. I mean, it's just the shutdown.
Marvin truly was unique. There's no one in the business. He was the absolute first consumer reporter ever on television. You know
I believe that. I believe that, yeah.
And I have to say, I'm rather proud. It was my idea to bring him over there. He was in the consumer fraud division. When I first moved to Houston, 1962, I was at K News Radio, and I made a call came in that some guy wanted for murder had been arrested over in southeast Houston. So I drove out there with one of those mobile units, and we're walking up to the scene. There's a Chronicle photographer right next to me. There's sheriff's deputies and police officers standing out front, cop cars everywhere. And in the middle, there was this guy standing there in a white suit, high starched white collar, white tie, full facial makeup, and a ridiculous wig on his head. It was hotter than hell. He was sweating, and that makeup was running down
all over his collar.
And I turned to this Chronicle photographer and I I see these cops here, but who the hell is that clown in the white suit? He said, oh, that's Marvin Zindler. He's the sheriff's deputy who arrested the guy. And I thought, my God, if that clown is loose on the streets with a badge and a gun, I have moved to a very colorful place.
But there is no reason why there should be any filthy restaurant kitchens in town. The owners and managers have the health and well-being of the public at stake and should take their responsibilities seriously. And as far as those permits are concerned, they should be revoked. And remember, more voluntary closings at 10, and believe me, some of those restaurants are so bad you can't believe it. Marvin Zindler, Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Marvin.
You know where his first job in television was?
Channel
2.
Yeah.
As a photographer. And he taught himself how to operate a sound camera, Archon sound film camera.
Oh, God, I remember
And
Argons.
he learned that he could put it up on the hood of his car, focus it about 10 feet in front of the headlights of his car, and then interview somebody. Well, he covered a fire late one night, interviewed a district fire chief, and they aired that on the 6 o'clock news on Channel 2 the next day. And after it ran, the station manager, who then was Jack Harris, called the news director, who was
Ray Miller.
and said, who is that guy we just put on television? He said, oh, that was the district fire chief. And he said, no, I don't mean him. I mean the kid that was interviewing him. He said, oh, that's Marvin Zindler. He's our night photographer. Well, Harris told him, listen, I don't ever want to see that guy's face on this television station ever again. He is too ugly.
He's too ugly, I know.
That was the one and only time that Marvin was on the air at Channel 2, and that's what started his series of facial reconstructive surgeries.
Of course, I've had 6 cosmetic surgeries.
Really?
Since, in fact, my navel's almost on the top of my head. But
Now that's just a joke, isn't it?
not really, almost.
Just a joke there. Now, let's talk about your appearance. Now, is that a toupee you're wearing?
It's a hairpiece, yes.
Yeah, and now.
Not all of it is, but most of it is.
Yeah, you seem really. You of course, obviously, a flamboyant character.
I don't know what the word flamboyant means. It's been described to me on different ways, and I really don't know.
Yeah.
Before those surgeries, he looked like a rat. Bless his heart.
Do you remember, I don't know which one it was, maybe number 3, when he decided he wanted to have a Kirk Douglas cleft in his chin?
No, I don't
And
remember
don't you
that.
remember that? Oh, they were going to take special pains to try to give Marvin a cleft right here in his chin.
Oh,
and I said, Marvin, I don't know. I said, if you do one more facelift, your navel will be there. Why you care?
Oh, man.
I mean, we were so, we were like a family. I mean,
Yeah.
even though it might take people, oh my God, I can't believe she's saying these things, but we did.
Yeah.
We didn't treat each other with kid gloves like
True.
that. I mean, it was like a brother, and y'all were always so kind to me, you know. I was the new kid on the block, and y'all had been there, and you'd already established 13, and you know, I got to just cruise right in, and y'all never put me down, and you lifted me up, and you carried me along, and you know, I kept thinking, God, I cannot believe they're going to let me come back again tomorrow. You know, some days I'd screw up
you
so
were
bad.
good. You were good. You really were, Shara. You were great on the air.
I
And you
remember.
would still be today.
Oh man, oh gosh. People ask me about this, you know, radio, on TV we sort of look down at radio, but I always noticed that everybody who had a background in radio, they were the best live reporters that we had. When we hired Wayne Dolcefino, and that guy would go out and cover a hurricane or anything else, he was the most natural. He had the most never-ending stream of words. Radio makes you do that because you can't fall back on the pictures.
Exactly.
You can't fall back on how good your hair looks.
In
You can't fall
radio.
back on any of that stuff in radio. It's got to be what you're saying and whether you can say it so it's coherent
Exactly.
and it's entertaining and you're not stuttering too much.
And it's informative.
Exactly.
And in a radio script, you have to paint a word picture for your listener.
Yeah.
Whereas in television, you just show them the pictures. It's totally different, the two lines of work. are totally different. Oh, let me go back to Marvin Zindler one more time. After that encounter, when I first saw him, he went from sheriff's deputy to being in the consumer fraud division in the district attorney's office. And he stepped on a whole ton of toes. The consumer fraud division, no, I think that the sheriff, Buster Kern, was up for re-election. And on January 1st, the first thing that Jack Hurd did was fire Marvin Zindler.
Really?
Fired him, said, "You're out of here." Well, of course, we carried the story that night. Everybody did.
Uh-huh.
And I got off the air, and Gene Burke, our assistant user, you remember Gene?
Very well.
He was standing at the door. And I said, "Gene, you know, the story we did on Marvin Zindler." He said, "Yeah." I said, "We ought to hire him and put him on the air here and make him our consumer reporter." He said, "Dave, that sounds like a pretty good idea." He said, "You know him. Why don't you call him?" So I did. I called him at his home that night. And I told him, "Marvin, I know you just got fired, but how would you like to continue what you have been doing, only instead of preparing consumer fraud cases to go to court, prepare consumer fraud cases to go on television and report about them?" You know what he said? He told me the exact truth. "David, there is nothing I would rather do." Well, he came in the next day. We hired him and put him on the air, and as they say,
The rest is history, isn't it ever? Yeah, I mean,
when he first started,
there's a serendipity. There's some sort of strange thing at work, isn't there? Sometimes.
Really. Well, when Marvin first started, they insisted all of his reports be taped. He didn't do any of them live. I was in the studio when he was doing his first taping, and he kept messing up over and over and over in his script. And of course, that was before teleprompter. You had to look down at the script, which is why I had to grow my hair out. I had short hair when I went to, well, that's another story. Anyway, he kept messing up. He went through, it must have been 25 or 30 takes. And I was in there when, toward the final cut, final tape, when he got down toward the end, you could see it come over his face. My God, I'm going to make it. And when he finished, he was so excited, he just shouted, "Marvin Zindler, Eyewitness News."
But that didn't stop me. Marvin Zindler, Eyewitness News. Marvin Zindler, Eyewitness News. Marvin Zindler, Eyewitness News.
And it was born.
And there it was. That started it. And he screamed his name like that every night.
You know, do you remember when the Newseum opened up in Washington, D.C., and maybe there was another one over in New Orleans? It was a museum dedicated to news and broadcasting. And I think it was the one that opened in D.C., and a lot of people went. And there was a family from Houston that went, and they were waiting in line because in one of there's like a mock studio, and they would let the kids who go through practice being newscasters, and they would sit up on the set and they'd roll cameras and they get to see themselves on TV, and it was quite exciting. And so these little kids were lined up to do it, and one little boy goes up and and he looks over at another boy, and then this boy goes, "Marvin Zindler, Eyewitness News," and the other boy, who was the anchorman, he goes, "Thank you, Marvin." Mimicking you. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times. It was always so bad whenever you would be on vacation and I'd be there and filling in for you. Of course, I'd carrying the show then. Then I had to say thank you, Marvin. There was no way I could say thank you, Marvin, the way you said thank you, Marvin. You know, and I'm think about all these live shows we did. Do you remember when we had Ray Charles live on the set? What was that for? Hands Around Houston, when we were doing that big food drive thing where we tried to have everybody link hands all the way around the West Loop.
I don't remember.
And we did like a musical show from one of the hotels over in the Galleria. We did the Challenger Gala after the Challenger explosion. We were sort of the beginning of Space Center Houston. We did that live show, and that little girl who starred in Annie on Broadway, she came. And she was on the stage, and she was singing tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. Well, no one told us. They told us we had to stay on stage and continue performing until the credits rolled. We'd done a 2-hour live show. And this little child, she'd run through the entire song, and she just kept repeating. She was like on replay here, and she's up there, this little girl, Annie, you know, with red curly hair. Tomorrow, 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 tomorrow. And the show was over. We were off the air, but nobody bothered to tell us. They were too busy high-fiving each other. Oh, what a great show we just did, you know. And we're having a stall, and I'll never forget, Bob Boudreau went out into the audience and started interviewing astronauts who were there. And most of them were military, and they were in uniform. And of course, Bob, you know, military, former military himself, he just did the most brilliant interviews with those astronauts about why we were there, what it was like to be in space, you know, and to have the Challenger disintegrate as it did. And it was just an incredible thing. And live TV, it's really hard to explain to people because it's so easy to do now. You know, anybody can do it with their phone, and they just don't understand. I mean, the first time I went to Israel, we had to rent a van to carry all the equipment because the satellite phone was so big. You know, it was in 2000. It was, you know, it was after the Persian Gulf War, and we had to be sure that if something happened, we'd be able to report from there. And I mean, our satellite phone was in a box this big and this heavy, and you know, just me and a photographer and trying to get through customs, and gosh. What we went through trying to get to the story, to get it done, to get it fed back. And now all you do is you do live, done, podcast. Here we are. You know, I'm laughing because I thought, gosh, they ought to be, you and I both started in film. And then videotape, and then we watched it go all kinds of permutations of videotape, and we saw microwave trucks come, then we saw the satellite trucks come, then we saw the portable units come, and then, you know, we lived long enough to see it come down to this.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the most, and even in radio, you know, I do video on radio. Kind of good that I have a background in it.
Yeah, really. I'll never forget one day, I don't know where I was, out on the street somewhere, and a little boy came up to me and he recognized, he says, "You Dave Ward, you Dave Ward, you know Bob Allen?" It was like one word, Bob Allen.
Bob Allen.
I told Bob that when I got back to the station. He got a kick out of that. What are your memories of Bob Allen?
Well, Bob Allen, his real name was Bobby
Robert
Galnick.
Galnick, yeah.
Bobby Galnick. He played Little League with my husband.
Oh.
So, longtime Houstonian, but he got his start in radio as well. What, up in Huntsville, or was it Nacogdoches?
I'm not sure.
It was one or the other, wherever he went to school. He started in radio as well. I've got so many memories of Bob.
Me too.
I mean, his long battle, because we were personal friends, and knew his wives. Bob was married several times, you know. And one of his wives, ex-wives, just called us 2 weeks ago. We hadn't talked to her, you know, in, I don't know, maybe
Eileen?
2 or 3, it was Eileen. Eileen called just to see how we were doing because we've all been so separated and locked down. And, you know, it just seems like it was yesterday, you know. And one of the things Bob was trying to get us all to do before he died, and it was just shortly before he died, he wanted us all, Ed was still alive, Bob, you know, we were all still here, Marvin was gone, but he wanted the 4 of us to go out and do speaking tours here in Houston to various charities and groups and everything, and just sort of revisit as the old gang. And he was all hot and hip and ready to do it. And then, you know, he took a turn for the worse. And then we lost him, so... You know, we've lost people, and, you know, John Davenport. Remember John?
Yes, oh yeah, very well.
Alvin Van Black.
Yes.
Remember that crazy Alvin Van Black?
Oh yeah, Alvin at night.
And his tuxedo.
Yep.
Which was an extra large.
Yeah, he was a big guy.
And he was a radio guy originally, too.
Yes, truly.
You know? I don't know, radio is a foreign world to me. It was when I walked in, and I have to learn something new every day.
Yeah.
You know?
Dave Ward and Friends is proud to be supported by the brand new 135,000 plus square foot Porsche River Oaks dealership from our friends at Sonic Automotive. I've known a lot of Porsche owners in my time, and one thing they've told me is that they really enjoy sitting down and specking out the Porsche of their dreams. The newly opened River Oaks Porsche will not only allow you to do that, but Porsche North America has broadened the allocation of all model types just for this new state-of-the-art River Oaks facility. General Sales Manager Carrie Jo McCrory and her entire team are excited to get you into the personalized Porsche of your dreams. It's now open in River Oaks. Tell them Dave Ward sent you. Let me ask you, did you ever go down to Kay's Lounge with me? I think you did, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And our Texas table?
Yes, the Texas table in the shape of the
You
state
don't
of
remember
Texas.
this, but there was one night when we closed down Kay's, which was usual. I mean, because
Yeah.
we didn't get off work until 11.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you were singing. And you have a beautiful voice. You know, you could sing in a choir, a church choir. I have a terrible voice, certainly not for singing. And you and I were standing out, if not in the middle of Bissonnette, very close to it, and we were trying to figure out a song that I could maybe hit the same key, and you started singing "The Wheel and the Wheel Way Up Yonder." I will never forget that because some enterprising photographer on our staff actually shot it.
Oh my. Really?
I have it.
Oh my.
I did not allow that. I did not allow that to go to the bosses. I did not allow that to go out there on a blooper reel. But I think that's why I remember it. I thought, oh my God, we could all lose our jobs, and Dave's at least got a good voice. I sound like a screech owl.
Well, you know, I grew up in the Baptist church and I had to sing in the choir.
That's right.
My father had a beautiful tenor voice. My mother had a beautiful soprano voice. My younger sister Mary had a beautiful alto voice, and I had to sing bass. We performed as a quartet one time at a church in, I think it was Lufkin, and we sang, "Lead me gently home, Father, lead me gently home. Da 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 da, lead me gently home." I'll never forget that as long as I live. It's the only one time we ever performed together as a family quartet.
You know, and
So long ago.
I have regrets for that. It was so fascinating for us
Yeah.
to be able to see technology change as rapidly as it did.
Oh yeah.
I mean, to think you were talking about an Auricon. We had an Auricon when I was in school at UT. It's double system sound.
Yeah.
You had to have a U-Haul to haul that thing around. I mean, it was so heavy. And I started with a CP16, sound on tape. So magnetic sound on tape. So I learned to edit film. But very quickly I had to learn how to shoot and edit videotape, because when you start out in a small place like Austin, San Antonio, you didn't have divisions of duties. You had to do it all.
Right.
You know, I anchored, I ran my own teleprompter, I did the news, I did the weather cast. I said, I never wanted to be a weather girl. So what do you end up doing if you're in TV news in Houston, Texas? You do an awful lot of weather. You have to know about weather. And now we're the official severe weather station in Houston, KTRH. So, during Hurricane Harvey, I must have done 25 EAS weather alerts, emergency system weather alerts. We couldn't get the news on because the siren was going off and I was having to do, stay tuned for an important message. I did 25 in less than an hour.
Wow.
On the air during Hurricane Harvey when it was first coming ashore, and all that rain and the thunderstorms
Yep.
it was kicking off and the flooding, and it was crazy. And I thought, you know what? I ended up having to be a weather girl after all. And it was so wonderful because Ed Brandon was not a meteorologist, but he grew up in Texarkana. I used to listen to him. He was on KTBC in Austin when I was in Austin. So he had a very broad background in weather and our weather, our vagaries of our weather.
There are lots of reasons why people watch Ed Brandon's weather forecast on Eyewitness News.
I watch him because he helps me get my son dressed for school.
Ed Brandon? Wouldn't miss him. He helps me get ready for work. I watch Ed Brandon so I don't look like I didn't watch Ed Brandon. You know what I mean?
Everybody has their reasons for watching Ed Brandon's forecast on Eyewitness News. But one thing's for sure, if you watch Ed Brandon tonight, you'll be ready for tomorrow.
You look like you watch Ed Brandon.
And sometimes the weather map doesn't tell you what you need to know.
True.
You know, it's your experience, it's your common sense. It's knowing which rivers rise, which creeks do. You know where the low levels are. You know about that fence up there on North 610. Some reason that big wet cotton ball that is the Gulf of Mexico stops a lot of cold fronts. You know, the folks in spring, they get deluged, but we'll have maybe a 15, 20 degree temperature difference between Bush Intercontinental and Hobby.
Right.
And we know that. But the guys who are giving you the weather from the maps from Pennsylvania or somewhere, they don't. And I always love the fact you could go to the bank with what Ed Brandon said was going to happen with the weather, even if it was totally opposite of what all the big time national meteorologists were saying. I
remember one time, and you may have been on the set with me, when I'm introing Ed Brandon and the weather, and it had rained, and I started out and I said, well, it rained in Houston today, and here's Ed Brandon to tell us why. And he looked at me, and he looked at the camera, and he said, well, that's because water fell from the sky, David.
You remember how, you know, people know about green screens now, chroma keys. You know, we had a blue screen for the longest time, and that was horrible because your eyes would key out, my eyes would key out.
Yep.
We couldn't wear that color of blue, this color of blue, couldn't wear it because you'd look like you were the headless horseman or whatever.
There was one night, I'll never forget this. I'm anchoring the news, it must have been on the 6th, and we're covering a fire. And they put me in chroma key with the fire, the flames in the background, but the chroma key on blue keyed my eyes out.
Yeah, because they weren't very good. They weren't
very. You could
see
flames in my eyes, and I got a call from a lady a couple of days later.
You look like a devil.
Yeah. She said, my father was watching, and you reported on that fire, and he said, oh, turn it off. That man is the devil. There's fire in his eyes. And
that's the funniest thing. But you know, we didn't see anything on the screen. We would have a monitor, and so Ed was very good at that. And do you remember when we had it? He turned around and we had these cameras mounted on skyscrapers downtown. You know, it was sort of like the first traffic cams, but we were doing it just to kind of show weather. We had a couple of cameras, and Ed turned around into the camera, and there was a pigeon or some bird that was right in front of the camera lens, and the thing looked like it was an albatross.
Yeah.
And Ed, he turns it to the green screen, but he's looking at the monitor, and he just, I'll never forget that. That bird was just like, the bird of prey, the bird of death. And he just burst out laughing, and he couldn't do his weather. He was laughing so hard. I mean, it's just little things like that. And what was so great, the people of Houston just let us get away with that. I mean, we would just laugh and keep on plugging. And I learned then, you know, it's better just to we're doing this for you. We're not up here trying, you know, as anchor people, we weren't up there trying to dictate to you, this is the news that's important. We were trying to include you. I mean, we had the opportunity to be there. The camera was there. I always felt like my job was to let people be where I was as much as I could.
Yeah.
And get out of the way. And it's really hard for me now to accept how much journalism is about the person who's delivering the news instead of, you know, everybody's got to be on camera.
It is really changed.
I don't really like to be on camera.
Yeah.
I always find the people that I'm interviewing or that I'm talking to much more interesting. And what's happening out there and being able to show people. And I was always so excited, and I thought, I hope people don't think I've got a big head about this. I am just so excited about what I get to do every day that I talk about it incessantly, because I think, oh, do you know how neat this is? This is so neat. Not because I get to do it. This is so neat, you know. I want you to be there with me.
Able to tell people what is happening and what is going on, and make sure you get your facts right and get information on the air to the people as soon as you can. I agree, and
It's kind
my
of
goodness.
it's sort of gone.
Well,
you know, I say
yeah,
it a lot on the air and the
industry-
radio because I'm not a journalist now. I'm not a journalist.
Yep.
I'm a radio entertainer.
Well,
An advertiser.
you're damn good at it, I'll tell you that.
I'm learning. I learn something new every day. It's just an amazing thing.
You are now on KTRH Radio.
Which stands for the Rice Hotel, because
Yeah.
that's where it first broadcast from.
Uh-huh.
Just like KPRC was the port of raw cotton.
Uh-huh.
KPRC
Well,
was originally.
you're on from what?
5
5
a.m.
a.m. to 8 a.m.
That's Houston's morning news, and then I do an 8 o'clock news cut in and another short one at 8:30, and then go down the hall and have the boss tell me what we did wrong, or maybe what we did right.
How often do you get back to Hallettsville?
A lot. Can't right now. It's been raining for so long. San Bernard River there is so high that it's up against the bridge, and so I have to go to Victoria. A dear friend, a family friend, died, and her funeral is Thursday, and so I'm going to have to get to Victoria and back because I can't miss the show. That's the thing people don't realize, I guess, about a job. It's not like, not everybody can fill in for Dave Ward. It's like, oh, Dave can't be here today. Oh, no problem. That's not the deal. So if you are on the flagship show, or you are the flag of the flagship show, you've got to be there. And so you come to work when you're sick. You come to work. You bury your father or someone, and you come to work the next day. Because you're in ratings, and you can't be gone.
Yep.
And people don't understand, and I think about how many family events you miss because you have to work Christmas Eve, because it's not your turn to be off.
Yep.
And that's just, like I said, it's not a job, it's just a way of life.
It is.
You almost feel a calling for it.
Yep.
You feel like you're doing your best for your community. You're trying to help the community understand. And certainly when we have these life-threatening situations like we do, with weather particularly, and I don't know about this whole COVID thing. The news, the information kept changing. And I felt just derelict almost some mornings because I didn't know whether what I was telling them was accurate. We remember the people who are long gone now. And there's that passing. It sort of makes us institutional. Forget about the institutional memory. I'm feeling like an institution, Some days I wake up and I think, how did I get so old? How did this happen?
Yeah, it just happens. I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 82, I'm getting up there.
Well, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but you can find it. Today's internet is pretty easy to find out and learn.
I'm shorter of breath and one day closer to death. but whatever.
Well, that sounds like a good song. Country western song, Dave.
The industry, the television news broadcasting industry, has changed so much since you and I were together, and I'm not so sure that it's been in a positive way. There's happy talk and all this garbage that they go through, to me, detracts from the delivery of the news and the information that people need to hear. And some of my pet peeves are on television when these reporters, and they all do it. The only one who says this word correctly on local or national television that I know of is Lester Holt, NBC News anchor. The word is detail, not detail.
The details.
Yes.
We laugh about that
We'll
all the
have
time.
the details coming in. We'll have the details coming
That's sort
in.
of a regionalism, colloquialism.
It may be
in
so,
Texas.
but I remember when
Texas
I
have a tendency to do that. We laugh about it a lot.
When I
at
was a
work.
child in Huntsville, probably my second grade or third grade teacher told us this little saying: defeat of deduct went over defense before detail. The feet of the duck went over the fence before the tail.
The tail.
Not defeat, not deduct, not defense, and not detail.
Defeat of
I never
the
forgot
duck.
that. Is there any one story that we covered together that sticks out the most to you?
Oh gosh, Dave. I think
covered so many.
I think it's Columbia. I think it's Columbia and the Challenger.
Yeah.
those disasters, but also, you know, we talked about it early on. These guys are running out of batteries. They're running out of memory sticks and everything. We could do this for a long time. I think those are the ones that just stick in my memory, where you feel like you're playing a vital role. You know, Allison, you're trying to help people how to survive.
Right.
You're trying to give them information that is going to either make their life better, help them with their families, help them get their kids to school, whether they get to go to school that day. Those are the things that stick. I mean, personally, I remember being jealous because you got to go on a submarine, and I didn't.
USS Houston.
You know, I got to fly with the Thunderbirds. I got to fly with the Blue Angels. I got to jump out of a plane, you know, with Bush 41 and the Golden Knights. I got to do that. I got to fly in the blimp, but I never had been up in a hot air balloon, and I've never been on a submarine.
Well, I've never been up in a hot air balloon and have no desire to.
No, I don't think I want to do that now, you know. And I don't know, the things that you get to do personally that I can't believe. I just can't believe. I grew up 100 miles from here in a town of 2,500 people. You know, the county is 17,000, 14 to 17,000 now.
Yeah.
Everybody's moving into Shiner from Austin. They're fleeing Austin. They're taking over Shiner. I'm not sure I approve, but you know, we had a nice little prosaic life for a long time. But how in the world do you go from that, drive for an hour and 45 minutes, and suddenly you're sitting down? And in Houston, Texas, I've interviewed. Well, I went to Austin to get Lady Bird Johnson. I never got to interview Lyndon Johnson. It was before I was in the business. But every president since then. I interviewed Richard Nixon here in Houston. I interviewed Donald Trump here in Houston in 1989 when he was just that developer. And he was still married to Ivana. I've interviewed every president of the United States, and it was because of my job working at Channel 13, ABC 13. You know, and up until Obama. And then, you know, I was no longer working there, but I did go to both of the Bush funerals. And President Obama and Michelle came to Barbara Bush's funeral, but President Obama came to President Bush's funeral. And so I saw him in person. But all the others I interviewed. How does that happen to a girl from Hallettsville?
Well, how does it happen to a kid from Huntsville? I grew up 75 miles north of Houston, and the way I got to Houston is the most
circuitous.
Yes, from Tyler to Waco in radio, and then to Houston in radio, and then going over to television. Things happen.
But you stayed at that television station.
For over 50 years.
For over 50 years. That is just an incredible thing.
Well, it put me in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yes, it did.
Well, Shara, you're an amazing person, I got to tell you. And
I'm so lucky. I'm blessed.
I so appreciate you doing this.
I miss you.
I miss you too.
You get to see this man every day for 27 years of your life, and then all of a sudden you don't.
Well.
You know? And now I don't get to see you on the air too much, but thank goodness for your blog.
My podcast, I'm still kicking in there every Thursday.
Well, we will link your podcast to our KTRH site.
Okay.
We'll get it up.
Shara Fryer, thank you so much for being a friend and a coworker and someone I've looked up to for all these years. Thank you for being here with me today, dear.
Oh, I love you, Dave Ward.
And I want to thank you for being with us on Dave Ward and Friends. Yuval Michler of Texas Mattress Makers immigrated to Houston when he was 18 and is a shining example of what makes Houston so great. It's the people. He's doing great things for our community. Here are a few words from him.
If you spend your money and you buy things that are from outside of your community, you're basically taking the good that you can do in your own community and you're distributing it to other places. At Texas Mattress Makers, we make mattresses where we all live. Foam we buy from Brenham, from Waco. Our springs come from Ennis, Texas, which is south of Dallas. Lumber comes from Louisiana, cardboard from Houston, plastic from Houston. If I take my money and I spend it overseas or wherever else, I basically stole someone's job here in Texas or Houston. I'm always going to have our community in my forefront when it comes to business. At Texas Mattress Makers, we're the only team in Houston with our own factory.
Get your best night's sleep with up to 30% plus free delivery on select mattresses.
We do one thing. We create the best mattresses in Texas.